In this example, we're going to set up a root standalone certificate authority. Step 1. Configure your soon-to-exist standalone certificate services certificate authority server with the static IP address. I'm going to set up certificate services, and I'm on a standalone 2008 server. So again, if I were to go over here, notice that I'm part of a work group, and it's just my host name. There's no FQDN, I'm not a domain controller, not even a domain member, but a standalone server. Second, once you have done this, install the Active Directory Certificate Services role. So to do this, I need to launch Server Manager. I can do that from the Start menu, or if you're like me and you have a shortcut, either way, select Roles, and then once you select Roles and it collects data, you want to click on Add Roles, and then select Server Roles, and then you want to select Active Directory Certificate Services. And I'm going to click Next, and Next, and notice my options here: Certification Authority Web Enrollment, Online Responder, and Network Device Enrollment Service, or NDES. So we're going to go with the first option here, Certification Authority. I'm going to click Next. Now I have two options here, and if I were a domain controller or a member of Active Directory, I'd have the first option available, Enterprise. Since I'm only a standalone, and the wizard knows that, that's the only option that's available. So we're going to do Standalone Certificate Authority. I could make a root or a subordinate CA. I'm going to choose root. Create a new private key or use an existing private key. Well, I want to create a new one. I'm going to click Next. Notice I'm using RSA, Microsoft Software Key Storage Provider, and a 2048 key character length there. So I'm going to go with the defaults. Pretty good security. Common name for this CA, Pegasus CA. That's fine. I'm not going to give it a distinguished name suffix. Validity notice, you can change the default, but I'm going to go with the default of 5 years for the certificate. Certificate database location, again, if you wanted to change that for backup purposes, I'm going to go with the defaults. And server might need to be restarted after the installation process. The name and domain settings of this computer cannot be changed after certification authority has been installed. Notice it says that, and that's for good reason. Again, to prevent somebody from trying to, spoof a certificate authority, or to make a certificate authority under one host name and then change it to another. So be aware that if for some reason you need to join a domain or unjoin a domain or change the host name, you're going to have to uninstall certificate services. So I'm going to click Install, and we'll start the process of setting up the CA. And installation succeeded. So I'm going to click Close, and now I have a certificate server. And there's a snap-in, management console snap-in that I can use to manage certificate services, and there's also certification authority here. Notice it adds some of these items here. And so we'll go into these in a little bit and just go over some of the different bits and pieces of certificate services. Okay, here's the third thing we need to do. Let's install a self-signed or domain certificate and configure the HTTPS binding and Internet Information Services for the default website. Then, enable SSL or Secure Sockets Layer for the certs server virtual directory. This will allow you to connect to https:// the hostname, which is your server, /certs server, using SSL and request a certificate. Okay, we've set up a certificate authority, and we've configured web enrollment. But there's still a few more things we need to do. We need to enable SSL. And in order to do that, we actually have to install a certificate in Internet Information Services. And to show you what I mean, I'll open up IIS, and let's look at the default website. And when, basically it'll be http:// localhost and then cert serve for someone to request a certificate through their web browser. But they'll need 443. And this is not enabled by default. So what you're going to have to do is set a binding. When you first start, you have to click on bindings and set the bindings. And in order to do that, you're going to need a certificate. And actually, I've already had mine set up, but I'll try to put it. You won't see this the first time you run it. That won't even be there. And you won't see this. Like, you'll go here to SSL, and this will all be grayed out. It won't be enabled. Okay, so because the binding won't be there. So to create the binding, you've got to create a certificate and install it. And there's several ways that you could do that. First, let me show you what I'm talking about. Here's the default website. I'll just type in localhost. Alright, so there's my Pirates website. Yarg. And then here is this is the certificate website. And I can get to this page okay. It's not HTTPS, it's HTTP, so it's port 80, not port 443 or secure sockets layer. But watch what happens if I request. And then let's say I want to get an email protection certificate. Notice it tells me in order to complete certificate enrollment, the website for the CA must be configured to use HTTPS authentication. And I haven't configured that binding yet in Internet Information Services. So if you haven't done that, this is the error message you'll see, and your users, your clients, won't be able to get certificates from you yet. So to remedy that, I mean, we could just make everything, we could try to edit the default binding and try to make everything HTTPS, but then people wouldn't be able to get plain text HTML like your website or your wiki or whatever. So we really need more than one. And to do that, like I said, I have to install a certificate. So I would go up here to where the server is, where it says Pegasus. And let me kind of pull that out some. And when I'm there, I can click on Server Certificates. Okay. And when I get to Server Certificates, probably the easiest thing to do would be this option, create a self-signed certificate. Now, it will work. They'll be able to to authenticate and to request certificates and then pick them up when they're granted or issued, but it will tell them, that, hey, this is not a recognized authority. It'll kind of have to click on an extra link. But let's go ahead and do the easy one first. So we will just call this self-signed certificate. We'll just call it what it is. And I'll click on OK. And so now if I want to, I can select that one and use that one to set up an HTTPS binding in Internet Information Services. Now, if I wanted to do, if I wanted to use a domain certificate, which would be a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess, proper or maybe appropriate or something. I could also do this. I could say create a certificate request. And in my certificate request, I could say Pirates and Yard. Pirates we be. Daytona and Florida and next. And I'm going to leave it at 1024. I mean, notice the different. Remember, the higher bit depth you go up, the harder it's going to be on your server to process. The more CPU cycles and calculations per second, the more resources you'll be using. Specify a file name for the certificate request, and I'm going to go to, I have a folder here on the C drive, and I'll put it in here, and I'm going to put it in right in here. I'm just going to call it pirates.txt, and I'm going to click finish, and I'm going to say yes. Okay, so that's a certificate request. And now that's part one of, I guess, maybe a three-step process. So part two would be, I would open my certification authority. I have a shortcut here, but all of these things, guys, are found under administrative tools once you install them. Internet Information Services Manager, because we set that up through when we were installing certificate services. Certification authority. So if you see a desktop shortcut, that's just my MO. I like to put little. My desktops are icon forms. I do shortcuts for everything. So if I want to open up certification authority, and when I do that, I'm going to go here, and I'm going to right click and select all tasks on the server. I'm going to say submit new request, and I'm going to go to that folder and just load that text file. Okay, and when I do, that'll throw a request in here for a certificate, and I'm going to right click on it, all tasks, and I'm going to say issue. This is good practice, I guess, too, by the way, for issuing certificates. So now that it's been issued, it's in my certificate store. Okay, and actually it's on the server. So I'm going to close this. That was step 2, and then step 3, I'd make a management console, MMC, Mickey Mouse console, whatever you want to call it, Microsoft Management Console, add a snap-in. And I'm going to add the certificates snap-in. And notice that I could do that for my user account, a service account, or the computer account. And if this were a permanent tool I was going to save, I'd add all 3 of them, and I just call it a certificate tool, and I throw it on my desktop. But for now, all it needs is the computer account. I'm going to say next and finish and OK. And on the local computer, I want to go down to certificate enrollment request, and I'll pull this out here so you can see. And certificates. And there's my certificate for Pirates. And so I could export it. if I wanted to, and next, and I'm going to go ahead and export. Again, I would do this extremely cautiously if this were a production environment, but just being a lab, and we're just trying to look at a dozen different ways to do something, or just because we can, we're not worried about that. But notice it's going to create a file with a .pfx extension. In this case, the private key, and I'll just give it, again, you'd never give it a single character password, but it's just for illustration purposes only. And then what do I want to call it? And I'm just going to overwrite the old one I had here, but you could call it banana or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so that's what I'm going to call it, Pirates PFX. I want to click next and finish, and it was done. And so that ends step 3. So I'm not going to save the console settings at this point, but so now, having done all that, I can go back to Internet Information Services, and then I can click on Import, and I can go Browse here, 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 and grab the PFX file, put the password in, click OK. Okay, and now it's imported Pirates. So either one of these, obviously this was the easiest one, and this is the one that we'll use, but I'm just trying to show you, some of the features of certificate services and how it's integrated with, or I guess how it works with Internet Information Services. So we'll use this one. Remember we came over here, we clicked on create a self-signed certificate, so there it is. So we're ready to set up bindings with it. And that was up here at the server level, so let's go down to the default website level, which is our website. And now I want to go ahead and click on bindings, and I'm going to click add, and I'm going to select HTTPS for secure traffic. And this time I'm going to select a self-signed certificate. And I'm going to click on OK. And I'm going to click on close. OK. And when I do that, that'll give me the capability now to do HTTPS, Secure Sockets Layer SSL over 443. So I'm going to go now to, it's my dog barking in the background, freaking out. So I'm going to go to Certificate Services. So we need to configure the bindings, and now that we've installed the certificate, I can come here and I can add, and I can select HTTPS, and I'm going to go ahead and we'll select the first one we did, the self-signed certificate. And I'm going to say OK, and notice now I can serve out both. I can serve out plain web traffic over port 80, and I can serve out secure web traffic over port 443, HTTPS or Secure Sockets Layer. And so if I do that, I go down here. And now, before this was disabled, and it was all grayed out. But now, because I've installed the certificate and I've set up the binding, I can check require SSL, and then it may be set to ignore by default, but you want to make sure that you check accept. And then I'm going to click on apply. And then now that I've done that, I'm going to go back and I'll actually be able to complete the process of requesting a certificate. Fourth, let's request a certificate. So I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to browse over port 80. And notice how, now the HTTP arrow 403.4 is forbidden. Certificate services, before I set up the binding, it let me load the page, but it wouldn't let me request a certificate. Now everything has to be HTTPS because it's 443. So if I put the S in there, then it'll tell me. And this is because we used a self-signed certificate. Hey, there's a problem with this website security certificate. Just click on continue to this website and OK. And then there we are. And also, notice that I can still get normal traffic. Like, let me pull out the S there. And if I did HTTP localhost, now I'm still pulling in traffic over port 80. Okay, so let's go back, and this time we'll request a certificate just to kind of test everything out. So HTTPS:// over 443 localhost, and I want to do certs server, certificate server, and I'm going to request a certificate. And look at the different options here. I could do email protection certificate. Notice I don't get the error message now. I'm able to to access everything securely. I could do a web browser certificate. I could do an advanced certificate request. Let's say I want one for IPsec communication. We were talking about IPsec the other day and setting up IPsec connections. So I could do that. Create and submit a request to this certificate authority here. Either way, I'm going to go for an email protection certificate. And this way I could set up, use it for a digital signature. And I'm just going to go ahead and put my name in here, Charles Germany, and my email, cgermany77@yahoo.com, and my company, Pirates, yar, and my department, yar, and my city, Daytona, and my state, Florida, and my country, region, United States. I'm going to click submit. Website is requesting a new certificate on your behalf. You should allow only trusted websites to request a certificate for you. Do you want to request a certificate now? Well, yes, I do. Okay? And then notice it says your certificate request has been received. However, you must wait for an administrator to issue the certificate you requested. Your request ID is 6, and that's because it's a standalone. It's not Active Directory integrated. It's not a domain controller, so it's not really going to do like auto enrollment or. But let's minimize this, and we're going to hop on over to the to the certificate tool. I'll keep all these tools open here, and let's look at actually how do you issue a certificate. So I'm going to open up Certification Authority, and let me close this Internet IIS here. We had 2 of them open. I only need 1. So this is pending now, and that's so I have a client, a user. He accessed my certificate authority through his web browser on my local area network somewhere, or maybe even across the internet. So I would look at pending requests, and now that request is there, and I can look at it and I can decide whether or not I want to issue it. It says I could issue or I could deny. I could view the attributes and extensions and see what exactly what's I'm going to be issuing. But I'm going to right click and I'm going to say issue. Okay, and when I do that, notice it shows up here under issued certificates. Okay. And then I'm going to go back to the web browser. So I'm back to the web browser, and we're going to go back to the site here. Let me go back to certificate server. And then view the status of a pending certificate request. So I'm going to click this link. And then select the certificate request you want to view. In this case, it was an email protection certificate that I could set up with Outlook or Outlook Express for use of a digital signature. I'm going to click on that, and then I can say install this certificate if I want to. And I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to say install this certificate. This website is adding 1 or more certificates to this computer, yada yada yada, and I'm of course just going to say yeah. I won't read through all that and bore you, but the new certificate has been successfully installed. Okay, and that was sort of our, that was for our digital signature. And then I could just go into, Outlook or Outlook Express, and I could go into the settings and use that certificate and configure a digital signature to prove the authenticity of who I am. Let's look at one more of these, and I'm going to go here and I'm going to request a certificate. And this is one, let's say we wanted to use one for IPsec. And again, I'm just going to fill out the information here. And I'm just going to do Battle Stars, Colonial Fleet. So unprofessional. Client authentication certificate, and just looking at some of the options, email protection certificate. I'm going to choose IPsec certificate, and I'm going to go ahead and go with the defaults here. RSA, 1024. Again, remember the higher you go, the more CPU cycles are going to be used. And actually, with IPsec, I'd use 2048 by default, but I wouldn't really go higher than that because you're going to seriously tear into your CPU cycles if you get a lot of IPsec going on and a lot of certificates being calculated and checksums and hashes and all that. I'm going to mark them as exportable. Again, I wouldn't probably do that in a production environment, but in a lab, we can kind of play with things that we wouldn't necessarily play with in in a mission critical situation. And then I'm just going to go ahead with SHA here, and I'm going to click submit. well, let me give it a friendly name here. I'm going to call this IPsec certificate. I'll put a little underscore in there. And click on submit and say yes. And I'm going to turn on it. So request ID is 7. And then again, I have to wait. So I'm going to minimize this. And again, with a standalone, it's not auto enrollment. It's not Active Directory integrated. And sometimes that's exactly what you want. For something really important, you kind of want, you want a human being to look at it and decide whether or not it should be issued. So once again, the administrator, he would log on to the certificate authority like we're doing now. He'd find the request. He'd click on all tasks. He'd say issue if he trusted that person. So now it becomes issued. And then that person later would come back in their web browser, and I'll go back here, and they could view the status of a pending certificate request. And notice here's my IPsec certificate, and I could say install this certificate. And I could say yes. And now my certificate has been successfully installed. So I'm going to close the web browser, and I'm going to close the Certification Authority Management Console with its snap-in. And I'm going to close Internet Information Services. And now what I'm going to do is open up that Microsoft Management Console again and add the snap-in. So I'm going to go here and certificates and add and computer account. And I'm also going to add user this time. My user account here. Don't really need service accounts at this point, but with these two nodes added, let's look at certificates for the current user. I'm just going to go to personal and certificates. Okay, notice I have these two here. Here's my IPsec certificate, and this is my. I wonder if I can pull these out and kind of let you guys see everything here. I'll try to do that. Pull that. Okay, so now you can see. So this was my IPsec certificate that I can now use to build security associations. Remember the last time we did that, we used a pre-shared key, and we said that wasn't a great idea. Well, it'd be better to use a certificate. So now I can use a certificate for IPsec communication. And basically what happens is both parties, say computer A wants to communicate with computer B and they want to build a security association, they would both have to apply to a certificate authority to get a certificate. It would be issued to them, and then it would be in their certificate store, and they could both use those certificates. They'd add the IPsec policy management snap-in, and they could go ahead and create security associations that way. So, and then again, this would be if I wanted to do secure email, I could use that for a digital signature. So, ladies and gentlemen, certificate authorities and certificate services. And that took a whole lot longer than I thought it would.